Huawei is the most controversial technology company in the world because in addition to the fact that this company is considered a symbol of China's rapid technological development, Western governments also consider this company a potential threat to national security. Therefore, in this video, let's try to understand how Huawei has become one of the main threats to the US and other Western countries. Let's start with the background. The official version says that Huawei was founded by Ren Zhengfei in 1987. At first, he was engaged in the sale of switches from foreign manufacturers, but then he decided to produce these switches himself. And so, the people who wrote this story want to convince us that an ordinary Chinese businessman went from garage production to a large company. However, in addition to the official version, there is also an unofficial one, which in my opinion is more plausible. Namely, that this Chinese company is closely connected with the Chinese government, and the success of this company is the result of a comprehensive economic policy of the Chinese government. Let me just remind you that within the framework of industrial development, the Chinese government in its 5-year plans set the goal of developing individual industries. In turn, this policy was, of course, to be implemented by certain people and companies. And therefore, it is not surprising that Huawei became one of such executors of state policy. If you watched my previous videos, then just recently, I released a series of videos on how in the past private companies received royal charters for monopoly trade in a certain region, and then colonized these territories in the interests of the state. And now, China works almost the same way, in the sense that private companies can be government agents. Because the advantage of such unofficial government-company relations is that the company itself and the government can also deny any ties between themselves. Here, I immediately recall the traditional scene in all the films of the Mission Impossible franchise when Agent Ethan Hunt was warned before each mission that if the mission fails, his connection with the Secret Service will be denied. And in this case, it is almost the same. Huawei, using the hidden support of the government, has been stealing Western technology for many years. And although the company itself has been repeatedly accused of doing this in the interests of the Chinese government, it constantly denies both the fact of theft and any ties to the Chinese government. At the same time, everyone who sees the scale of this company's espionage activities understands very well that one company could not independently engage in such powerful operations as Huawei does. At least, because this requires resources, its own army of hackers, industrial spies, and a bunch of expensive equipment. And so that this does not look like an unfounded accusation, let's speak in the language of facts. The very first and most interesting example of technology theft was Huawei's cooperation with the telecommunications service provider Nortel. At one time, Nortel was a large Canadian telecommunications company. And by the beginning of 2000, this company was the world leader in the market of fiber optic data transmission systems and controlled thousands of patents for fiber optic and wireless technologies, which were to become the basis for future generations of wireless networks, such as 4G and 5G. And somewhere in the 90s, against the background of the growing popularity of offshoring, the company's management decided to outsource part of its operations to Huawei, after which the company itself began to have problems. After all, soon, from the late 1990s, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which is the Canadian equivalent of the CIA, recorded unusual traffic from China to Nortel sites. They, of course, warned the company's management about this, but the warning was ignored. Then in 2004, Nortel faced an accounting scandal, and CEO Frank Dunn, accused of fraud, was forced to resign. And when, against the background of this scandal, the company conducted an internal audit, it turned out that the former director had sent 800 different files to China. That were the company's trade secrets. It also turned out that Chinese hackers had somehow gained access to the accounts of 6 important Nortel employees, and then used this access to send information about customers, research and development, and various project documentation to the email addresses of a fake Chinese company registered in Shanghai, which, by the way, had no commercial relations with Nortel. And although after this incident, the security service stopped this channel of information leakage, the Chinese managed to find other ways to access Nortel's trade secrets. Already in 2013, the well-known American cybersecurity company Mandiant, by the way, which was bought by Google in 2022, published a large-scale study on the facts of cyber espionage in 140 companies in the USA, Canada, and other countries. And they recorded that in the case of Nortel, this cyber attack lasted at least from 2000 to 2009, which is twice as long as any of the hacks described in the Mandiant study. And the methods used for the hack were so sophisticated that it was obviously the work of government agencies, not a private company. Moreover, while Nortel was trying to deal with its internal problems, the Chinese wasted no time and began a rather aggressive expansion into markets that were previously controlled by Nortel. Of course, competition is a normal phenomenon in a market economy, but the methods themselves were not entirely fair. Because in addition to stealing technology, they also dumped prices on the market. Well, in order to beat the prices of competitors, the Chinese offered customers prices 40–50% cheaper than their competitors through dumping. In general, the dumping policy is not a unique Chinese feature, and this tool of competition is used by companies all over the world. The main difference between Chinese companies is that they work in close collaboration with the government. And if private companies dump prices using only their own financial resources through cross-subsidization, when losses in one direction are covered by profits in another. Chinese companies cover their own losses with generous financial support from the government. And given China's enormous financial capabilities, it is clear that no private company will be able to stand up to such power on its own. Also, in addition to dumping prices, they offered customers additional special conditions, such as cheap loans. In 2005, the China Development Bank provided the Nigerian government with a $200 million loan at an absurdly low interest rate of just 1% to purchase Huawei equipment for the national wireless network. Of course, Western companies could not afford to provide such conditions to their clients. That is why, thanks to cheap loans from state-owned banks such as the China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China, that Huawei squeezed out foreign competitors such as Nortel, which were also operating in this market, and then took their place. In 2005, the company won part of a £10 billion sterling project to replace 16 national telephone networks in the UK with a single digital one. Nortel, which was also a participant in this tender, lost this battle. Also in 2008, Huawei defeated Nortel on its domestic territory, receiving a contract to build a wireless network worth $1 billion Canadian dollars in Canada itself for Canadian providers Telus Corp and BCE Inc. And so, in fact, the loss of these markets led to the decline of Nortel itself, which went bankrupt in 2009. And the Chinese, having destroyed their competitor, achieved their goal, becoming the main player in this industry. And although this is just one example, it very well shows how closely Chinese companies are connected to the Chinese government, and how they work together to destroy foreign competitors in order to seize world leadership in certain industries.